Okay, hello, and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 24 report. The sprint just ended this week on Monday, June 1st. Next slide, please. So we'll be giving you an overview of the sprint statistics that we always do. Greg Blomquist will tell us about what's new in the providers world. Greg McCullough will tell us about what's new in provisioning. Dan will tell us what's new in the UI. And I will talk about upcoming pretty major changes. And John Mark will talk about the community. Next slide, please. Okay, this sprint we had 117 pull requests merged. 55 of them were bugs, 31 enhancements, 6 technical debt, and 11 refactoring. I think this number is kind of low, given our last few sprints, but I also think it's the calm before the storm. And I'll talk about kind of the upcoming code changes and what that will mean to all of us. There's also 100 pull requests, roughly 100 pull requests under review. We try to not let it go up too far above 100. I know it recently was about 120 or so, or 130. And guys did a good job on getting that number down to roughly around 100. Next sprint, we'll see if we can get that number down lower by, say, 10 or so. That would really be good. Okay, next slide, please. Over to Greg to update us on the providers.
All right. So during the sprint, we had 26 pull requests come in from the container management integration team. Among those, we saw several new inventory items for Kubernetes, like replication controllers, routes, and projects. We also saw the addition of the OpenShift provider. That's derived from the Kubernetes provider, so it's OpenShift v3. I just want to extend some thanks out to the container management integration team for all their hard work this sprint. Next slide, please. Whoa, there we go. That looks better. So on the OpenStack front, we had a couple of bug fixes that actually resulted in better debugging for AMQP issues. So with Rabbit, with Rabbit-based messaging, we noticed that only one appliance could bind to any single Rabbit exchange. This meant that any appliances, like the first appliance would bind to Rabbit, and if any other appliances tried to connect to the same OpenStack instance and bind to that same Rabbit, they wouldn't get any messages. But they would think they were correctly bound, and they would think that just no messages were flowing. The problem turned out to be some naming collisions on the binding queue. So if you look at the before picture here, we used to just call them the same name as the exchange name. So the exchange name is notification star, and we just called the binding queue notification star. We're now creating unique binding names that include the host or IP for the appliance it's connecting. So you'll see this in the after picture. The binding queue has a name of MIQ-IP address and then the name of the service that it's binding to. So if you ever need to debug any kind of AMQP issue, you can list out the binding, list all the bindings, and you'll see which appliances are bound to which services. On the Cupid side, we had a slightly different problem where they introduced a new exchange topology pattern. And while we were adding support for that, we also added support for this binding queue change name or name change on the Cupid side. So for both Cupid and Rabbit, when debugging any kind of AMQP issue, you should be able to see this new way that we're calling the binding queues. And I just wanted to call out our QE team and the OpenStack integration team. They did a lot of hard work in tracking this down. This was a really nasty thing to find because it was so, it seemed so intermittent. But they did a lot of great work tracking that down. And that's it. Next slide.
All right. In provisioning, the sprint we enabled the auto placement for SCVMM. Most of the providers support this, so the new method in Automate is largely based on the VMware version for least utilized, which is looking at hosts that are currently powered on and then sorting them by the least number of VMs on each host, and then finding the storage with the most free space. And then to support this, we needed a schema change on the placement class. So the image there is of the default instance, showing the Microsoft entry as the last one, and then accepting a message of Microsoft, which gets passed along from the state machine to run just that piece during Microsoft provisions. So that's there, and obviously it can be overridden and changed to be, support different best fit algorithms, but the default is now in place, and you can use that. Otherwise, this for provisioning the dialog field validation, we added for non-required fields. We've always had validation for the ability to specify a method of validation for a required field. If you changed it to not required, that method wouldn't run, which was good, but there were some cases where fields weren't. We just wanted to validate if you did provide a value, it fit within the requirement. So the place where we're using this today is for VM memory reservation, to make sure that the memory you're reserving is less than or equal to the amount of memory allocated for that VM. We'll probably be able to use this for other fields right now, but that's the only place that's exposed at the moment. So, or I'm sorry, not exposed, but set. That was a good one. Next slide. And I just wanted to point this one out there. There was a fix we had made previously where we were calling a method twice and didn't realize that the second call was actually being invoked later in the process when VM naming was happening during services. So that actually broke the ability for services to enforce a unique name on a VM that's being provisioned under the service. So if anybody's running into that, we got that fixed in this sprint as well. That was kind of a big run. Number of people ran into that. So just wanted to point that one out. And I think that is it. Next slide.
All right. So we had a lot of QE going on last couple sprints, and they've obviously uncovered quite a few bugs, mainly because we've done so much refactoring recently. So there were 40 UI bugs fixed in this sprint. Some of the notable ones were, since we got the Japanese translation files recently, that exposed some bugs in that area. So we fixed quite a few bugs in the I18N area, as well as there was a nasty bug in the RBAC features with the new Foreman support, where if you would turn on something, say an accordion inside Foreman, it wouldn't actually turn on the tab above it, so you couldn't actually see the accordion. You'd have to go back and turn on the tab, but you turn on the tab, then you'd get all the accordions. So anyway, realigned all those with the proper tabs and accordions with the proper features, and should all be working now. And that's it. Next.
Okay, I want to talk about some big changes that are coming up soon, and that will affect both the users' lives and the community's lives. The developers' lives. So I think the first big one is we want to try to convert the ManageIQ repo to be a standard Rails app. So technically what that means is that there's currently 4 directories in the repo: lib, build, system, and VMDB. The idea is to extract or move the lib, build, and system directories either to other repos or to other subdirectories. Then we're going to reset the root directory to what is currently the VMDB directory. So that's kind of the technical underpinnings of what that will mean. The bad news here is that basically all current pull requests will need to be updated and rebased, and it's gonna be a challenging rebase because kind of the root directory is changing. Cherry picking PRs to Bitvinik and other stable branches will be harder because of the same issue, and we will have to adjust the build process to take into account these big changes. The reason that we're doing all of this is that because we're a non-standard repo, developers who join the project have a challenging time figuring out where things are and how things are. Once we make this change, developers can open up a standard Ruby on Rails tutorial book, look at our repo, and it should look very similar. The other thing is that various tools out there that we want to use have an assumption that we are a standard Rails repo, Rails app. So those two things will become easier, making it easier for new developers to join and making it easier to integrate with various tools out there in the cloud. So that's the big one. And we already have this one in the works. Jason has been researching this, and we should be embarking on this next week. The other big one that's going on is that we're going to be upgrading to Rails 4. Aaron Patterson has been working on a pull request 2608 for many months. He has us all converted as well as the tests all green on that pull request. He'll have to rebase that, and once it's rebased, we'll merge it and we'll be upgrading to Rails 4. I don't recall which specific Rails 4 version, but I'm assuming it's going to be a Rails 4.1 or 4.2. That particular pull request, for example, has 100 commits inside of it, roughly. So these are like big things. The other one is that we're discussing upgrading to a newer version of Ruby 2, either 2.1 or 2.2. The other big thing coming soon is step one of getting us to pluggable providers. Matthew Draper has been working on this pull request, I believe it's 1886. And that one is about namespacing each provider, kind of giving a fully qualified class name to each provider. This will allow us to, in the future, go off and put each provider into its own directory, and ultimately each directory into its own separate gem that different teams can then work on to add new providers. So that also will have quite an impact, because I'm not sure that all of the code is. A lot of the code will have to be reviewed to make sure that it understands the new full namespace, fully qualified namespace of each provider. The other thing that we're working on is there's a bunch of external UI code that's sitting in our directories, and we want to move them to gems. One such example is the code mirror JavaScript library. We're moving that into a gem, and that's in pull request 2457. So that's kind of part one of the actual code changes, and this will mostly impact developers. It will also, especially the first two, or actually most of these, may cause the code to be unstable for a bit. So we will try to restabilize as soon as we can. Next slide, please. There are similar changes going on to the appliance. I don't think that they're going to hit this sprint, but they will be coming up in the upcoming sprints here over the summer. The three big ones is that we're going to upgrade the appliance to run on CentOS version 7. And that has a different way to deal with networking and firewalls and some other things. So we're going to have to kind of adjust our appliance integration in that regard. The other one is we will be upgrading our appliance to use Apache 2.4. And finally, we're going to also upgrade Postgres to go from, I think we're currently on 9.1 or 9.2, and we're going to go to 9.4. So those are kind of the big changes happening. Not all of them will happen next sprint, but I think that the rebasing of the repo and the upgrade to Rails 4, those two, I'm assuming, will be merged in this next sprint in the next few weeks. So, community users, as the appliances come out with all these new changes, we'll make some more announcements about that, but it would be good if you guys can give us some feedback to make sure that we can stabilize all these changes as soon as possible and get back to adding features and squashing bugs. All right, thanks a lot. Next slide, please.
All right, thanks, Oleg. That sounds like some exciting changes. A couple data points before I go through the slide. We had our first ever community day at OpenStack Summit in Vancouver. It went really well. We had some great content. It was a lab, and we have a blueprint now for future community days, which is great. In addition to that, if you look at talk.manageiq.org, there's been an uptick in activity. We're getting some really good users now asking questions and good stuff there. So it's always a good place to go whenever you want to find out anything about ManageIQ. So going to the slide, we have next week an online kind of meetup or webinar all about what's new in Botvinnik. The release is very imminent now, and we'll go through what are the new features, how can you use them, and we'll even have some couple of quick demos to sort of demonstrate how you put them to use. You have the RSVP URL right there in front of you, manageiq-release.eventbrite.com. The other thing is we're going to have our second community day. This one's going to be at Red Hat Summit in Boston. It's going to be Thursday, June 25th, probably from 11 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. But look for more details this week. I had to make a couple of blog posts early this week and today. So once that clears up, I'll probably I'll post the details tomorrow, or Thursday or Friday. And then finally, really good news. We have officially begun development of the next version of the extensions depot. And after we've made some progress and have something to show, we will start staging it, and I'll send around the URL so you can see it for yourself. In the meantime, we have about 9 different extensions that are currently available on the version of the depot that's online now. If you go to manageiq.org/depot, you'll see them. And that plus a whole lot more will make up the new depot when it's ready to go online. Thanks.
The next sprint report is scheduled in 3 weeks, as always, and our sprints last every 3 weeks. And I know that we've also been getting more participation from other teams at Red Hat doing other things. Going forward, I will try to align the other team's work to kind of our sprint cadence and see if they can start including their work in our sprint demos. All right, and that's all I have for today. I turn it over for any questions from on the phone or in the Blue Jean session. Looks like there's no pretty quiet crowd today. Okay, well, if there are no questions, I want to thank everyone for getting all the work done on this particular sprint, and really want to thank each and every person involved, and look forward to great things going forward. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.